All right, so welcome all to the meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee to the BOR. It's May 12th, 2023, and we have some guests with us. So let's get started with approval of the April 2023 minutes. Move on to the agenda, and then we'll get our discussion on the transition to the Consolidated College started. So committee members should have the minutes in front of them. Do we have a motion to approve them? Okay. We have a motion from David Blitz. Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion, modifications, corrections?
Yeah, there is a statement there by me that, at least it's in the recording, that the people responsible for the transition should be fired, drawn, and quartered. I'd like to clarify that the drawing and quartering was a metaphor.
Okay.
It was not intended as a threat. Secondly, that the comment was not intended at the rank and file people who work in the New Britain office, but rather the management. With that correction, I'm fine with the minutes.
Well, can we clarify that that is not in the minutes?
Oh, good.
Okay. Well, good. All right. Do you want that clarification anyway, Andre, since it is?
No, if it's not in the minutes, then it's not necessary.
Okay. All right. So we're back to approval of the minutes as is. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Or let's say, are there any opposed? All right. Any abstentions? Okay. Minutes are approved. Let's move on to the agenda. Okay. Motion to adopt the agenda as is.
Motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any modifications? Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we are good to go. All right, so welcome to our guests. President Maduko, this is your first time meeting us. So you're almost rounding out your first year with the system. I mean, I think I have a couple comments to just kind of start our discussion off today. We gathered questions from the committee, and the committee gathered questions from their campuses, or issues rather. And I think none of them is unfamiliar to you, but we tried to get them in the form of questions so we can get some sort of feedback today. It's kind of a long list. So the way that we said we wanted to kind of address it is that I would sort of very quickly ask them, but members of the FAC would also jump in for further expansion, clarification, etc. Right? So I hope there's enough time to get to most of them. If not, we will share the full list with you. Okay. Do you all want to go around and just kind of all the guests introduce yourselves individually, and then we'll start it off?
Yeah, absolutely. Members of FAC, Dr. Sasenker, happy Friday. And I think it's afternoon, so good afternoon. Thank you for the invite. We're definitely happy to be here for an opportunity to address the questions and concerns you have of us. And if there are things that we can address, we are committed to obviously getting our hands on that master list and providing you responses and updates and anything else that's needed. So John Maduko, pronouns he, him, his, president, Connecticut State Community College.
I'll go next. I'm Dr. Maya Lafayette-Drenker. I'm the interim provost, excuse me, interim provost for CT.
Good afternoon. I'm Tamika Davis. I'm the interim vice president of enrollment management.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Gail Barrett, associate vice president of enrollment and retention services.
Amy, go ahead.
Hi, I am Amy Fest. I am the AVP of Programs and Curriculum.
Hi, everyone. Mike Stefanowicz, Interim AVP in Academic Affairs for Higher Ed Transitions at Connecticut State.
Good afternoon. Manuel Gomez, AVP for Academic Operations.
Is that everyone? Sorry, people move around on the screen, so I'm just making sure. All right, yes. Go ahead, Dr. Matuka.
And yes, I want to let everyone know I'm up here at Esnuntuck. There's the manufacturing competition. I think I'm going to miss it, unfortunately, but I have a hard stop at 1:20, 1:30 because being in Enfield, I have to hit the road and speed all the way down to Norwalk to meet with that campus community regarding our budget. And I want to be respectful to our colleagues down there, but obviously you see a full complement of central office leaders here to answer questions and receive them and lend their support and commitment to obviously this body and obviously the advocacy and representation that you provide.
Right. So, and does that mean that the rest of you could stay a little bit beyond that?
Yes, please. Yes, folks, if you mind. Yes.
Okay. So let me begin then by directing a few things towards you, Dr. Maduko, and welcome to the FAC. We're going to be pretty true to form with you today, but I know that you are fine with that. And we're really excited about the possibility of a really straightforward conversation with you. So I want to make sure that we kind of begin with the tone, right? We have a lot of questions to ask, and while nothing that we bring up is going to be a surprise to you, none of it is a direct consequence of your leadership either, but all of it is the terrain that you've been tasked with leading us through into the future, right? And this is a pretty historic moment. At the end of the semester, all 12 of our community colleges will close their doors forever. And rather than sort of celebrating what they were or mourning their loss, our current focus is which of us will get pink slips, when, and what will it take to get our students safely to the fall semester at the very least. I'll say that the fact that Connecticut's poorest student body, which is majority Black and Brown, the fact that it is being herded into an institution where the infrastructure is still being built, where processes are only half created and untested, where crucial aspects have yet to receive official approval, from which resources, both human and capital, are currently being drained at what the system claims is an unprecedented degree. Shouldn't be a surprise to any of us, right? But I'm going to guess that you were lured here with advertisements about an anti-racist institution built on the principles of equity. So I don't envy you. And I want to ask, a few questions aimed towards getting a sense of how close we are to sort of being ready for the next few months. So the first question is, when will the state's OPEID, right, that's the financial aid number, be approved? And what is the status of students' financial aid until then?
Yeah, great question. So currently, per the guidance of the United States Department of Education, we are permitted to use the financial aid ID of Capital Community College to ensure that current and new students or returning students can continue with their financial aid applications, and obviously working with our financial aid teams to access Title IV funding and what have you. In terms of the approval process, we are in constant communication with the Department of Ed, and along the lines with with NETCHI, our accreditor, we're looking, to a midsummer announcement or update from them regarding our approval as CT State Community College in terms of our Title IV funding and the ability to access that. because we have summer courses, right? They're pretty stringent in terms of, they need to see from us a closeout, quote unquote, in terms of, financial aid files, students that have been packaged, the litany of reports and standards that we have to commit to and obviously provide to them. So there's a lot to do, but our team, our Title IV team, led by both, Tamika Davis and specifically by Steve McDowell have been on it. And we're confident that we are adhering to what they need to see from us. And when it comes to the Department of Education, obviously NETCHI, two separate entities, the feds kind of do their own thing. But we are committed to holding our students harmless and ensuring that they are afforded and have access to the available funds that they're eligible for.
Does anybody need any mic?
Lena, you can veto me on this if you want. I just want to say, since Dr. Duca has to leave soon, I'm wondering if we might want to ask an overarching question because all those questions are great, but all of them are a subset of kind of not confirming or not communicating with people and finding out, how the registration works and doesn't work. And so I don't know if you want to ask a broader kind of question first about, again, I think you're right, Dr. Maduka came here. This isn't his setup, but I'm just wondering if we want to talk about how things would go better if there was more consultation about all these things that are going wrong with the registration. It's up to you. I'm only bringing it up because I know he has to leave soon. Thank you very much.
Sure. I mean, we have sort of a more overarching question than the ones that we sort of put together. But I mean, I don't know if that's just, there's something more general that you might want to say, Dr. Maduka. I think, I mean, we will be able to talk to the people who are actually running these processes about the details, right? Even after you leave. I think the question that probably speaks most to your role might be this one, right? Our current budget crisis and the political climate don't actually indicate that the new college will have a whole lot of external support, right? In fact, Governor Mott's recent interview was quite clear about his vision for the community colleges and was unapologetic about the budget's potential consequences for the workforce. So, I mean, there are three questions that I think come out of this. I'll read them all to you and then maybe we could go one by one. But first is just this. His characterization of our community college were sort of night classes and certificate programs that could be achieved within weeks. Is that your vision for the community colleges? And like what's missing in that understanding of what a community college actually is and contributes to the state? That's the first question. The second is there's quite a lot of work ahead of us to get the college running even adequately. How do you launch a college while being starved into reductions by your primary funding source? And how responsible is it, to move forward like with something on this scale with no investments on the horizon? And the third is, if the budget remains as is, how do you represent to NETCHI that you've met Standard 7's requirement of financial capacity? So I don't know if you want, if you can address all of those.
Yeah, so thank you for the questions. I'll start with question one, but I see there's the hands down. So in terms of Governor Lamont's recent interview, and I want to make it clear, I do not speak on behalf of our governor. I speak on behalf of me and obviously CT State. So I think in that interview, there were references to Connecticut State University. I guess there's a new institution in the state, 11 community colleges instead of 12. And that, as a suggested focus on simply short-term credentials. So I'll say this, as educators and as leaders and as advocates, we always have the responsibility to continue to educate people about really everything, especially the nature of the institutions, and ultimately the institution that we serve. We have 12 comprehensive community colleges, and we're working to to merge into one comprehensive statewide community college. And we have a litany of options for students. And I think that is the strength and nimbleness of community colleges. And that's what I would convey to the governor and convey to his staff and the General Assembly and to the public, right? And this is not simply a Connecticut narrative. This is a national narrative in terms of the power and scope and size and strength of community colleges in terms of the mission of us being open enrollment, us being the stewards of equity, being the rising tide, et cetera. I think I think information is really, really powerful, not only to share, but to help people understand that, when you look at our academic portfolio, but more important, the programs of study that our students are enrolled in, primarily our credit-based students, our bread and butter is two-year degrees, associate's degrees, right? Like the majority of students that enroll at CT State are seeking 2-year credentials, have it be to directly enter their profession for a family-sustaining career, or also to matriculate into a 4-year institution. And we're proud of that. And we're proud of the credentials and degrees that are and programs and disciplines that are faculty, shepherd, and steward. So we're unapologetic about that, and we welcome the opportunity to communicate with everyone regarding that. Is there a space for short-term credentials? There is, because we offer short-term credentials, both credit and non-credit. I think for me and my take on the narrative that is not complete when it comes to community colleges is that, we are a spectrum and we provide multiple entry and exit points for students based on where they are. And again, that's our strength, not to dictate what students should do, but to say that, hey, there's an opportunity and there's always an option for you. And we get it. We get there's a workforce shortage. Our colleagues on the non-credit and workforce and continuing education side of the house are working tirelessly to provide reskilling, upskilling, for a litany of individuals. But that's not our only forte, our only strength, right? We have the full complement, and that's what I would speak to. I think too, regarding, how do we stand this thing up called CT State? If there are concerns about the budget, there are concerns about potential reductions in force, which I will say for the record, and which I've told the 5 previous institutions that I've met with this week, no decisions have been made. You can FOIA my emails. I have yet to say the L word or make a list and identify any areas, because I'm not giving up until we do everything we can, until we get the final word of where the budget's going to land. But I will say this, how do we stand something up? Well, we've done a lot of work already, right? There are a lot of students who have gone from legacy programs into CT State programs, right? There are students who have applied and are registering for classes for CT State. So a lot of work has been done. And I think wherever the budget lands, I think it's really important that we prioritize our needs, right? First and foremost, teaching and learning. That's our bread and butter. That's why we're here, right? In terms of resources and capacity. Second, student support services. For example, public safety. Another example, mental health, which we are committed to. I think third is physical plant and IT infrastructure, right? Our infrastructure is very important to allow us to do the things that we need to do. Fourth is something that I can't think of, and fifth is DEI, and we're still committed to that, but it's going to be challenging based on some of the projected concerns. So I don't have an answer now in terms of how do we do all these things, but I think we've done it already in terms of we have to prioritize what's more important, and I am committed to that. And that means other things have to go to the back burner, and that includes, certain things that we were previously committed to. Then, those difficult decisions have to be made. And then lastly, in terms of NECHI and our work with them, and adhering to all of their standards and how it's going to work. What I've been committed to with NECHI in terms of their president and vice president is making it clear and delineating what we do as an institution, currently 12 institutions, what we're gearing up as one institution, and that we are a member institution along with other institutions, a part of CSCU, versus the state of Connecticut that has its own rationale and things to do. And I think it's really important that we continue to make the case that, this budget situation and the decision of both the governor and the appropriations committee, I'm not going to put that on our people. I'm not going to put that on our faculty or staff or our administrators. I think all of us continue to advocate for our needs, our value, what we do for Connecticut, and that let's call it what it is. A lot of this is out of our control, and we hope we fare well when the biennial budget is finalized. But what I would tell Netchi is, it's not just a CT State Community College. It's also our sister CSUs. It's Charter Oak State College. It's our entire system, right? That we have concerns, and to penalize or maybe even to hold us to scenarios and realities per someone else's or other entities' decisions, I think that would be unfair, especially now. And I still think I would just add, the narrative out there is, well, you guys are down in enrollment, and so therefore you need less. And my response to that rhetoric is that higher education is down in enrollment. New England is down in enrollment. New England institutions won't hit the enrollment cliff until 2025. And if we continue to compare our enrollment to a decade ago, that's really short-sighted and lazy and unfair. Higher education is down from 10 years ago, but those numbers were inflated per the Great Recession, and those numbers were insane, and we knew those numbers were going to drop, right? And I think people need to recognize, specifically for community colleges, we were #1 in the country when it came to the enrollment decline. We were #1, Arizona was #2. We took the biggest hit in terms of enrollment shortfalls, and it's due to a litany of reasons. Let me make it clear, not due to the lack of effort of our faculty and staff and our leaders, but due to it's Connecticut. Connecticut has the highest level of wealth, the lowest level of poverty, and it's hard to live in the state. And our students, as they should, chose life over their education. We don't fault them. We don't penalize them. We're here waiting for them to get back on their feet and help them with their course of study. So that's where it is, and that's going to be the argument and rationale and the discourse that we are going to engage with Netchi, right? In terms of the standards that they're holding our feet to, but they need to factor in there are other variables coming into play here in Connecticut, and people might not accept this answer, but damn it, that's the answer I'm going to give them.
All right. Given that you just have a couple minutes, does anybody want to just jump in with a question for Dr. Maduko before he has to leave? We have much more specific questions, lined up. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you for coming, Dr. Maduko. I appreciate it. I just wanted to ask, I would add to your answer the notion that not just has education dropped everywhere, but we were always underfunded in the first place. I think that's the most important thing, is that's the biggest problem, is that if you keep the percentages of where we were before, yes, you cut us, but we were already underfunded and not serving students the way we needed to. I just wanted to add that, but thank you for your comments.
Well said. I'm going to steal that from you and include that in my narrative. So thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to ask questions that you can jump in on, or anyone can jump in on now, but I just want to say thank you.
Can I add something? The thing is that our enrollment may partially be down because of some of the difficulties that we're facing in terms of serving students and registering. And it's not just COVID, but it's also the fact that the system is we've got students that sort of wake up all of a sudden, they thought they had two courses to complete the degree, and now all of a sudden they wake up, they have 10 or something. There's a whole lot of problems that we're trying to solve, and that also I think weighs us down in terms of enrollment.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree that there are challenges and there's things that we're actively working on, and the more we hear from our faculty and staff and everyone in partnership, we are willing and committed to address those issues. I will say this: yes, compared to 10 years ago, we are down in enrollment. Compared to the beginning of the pandemic, we're down in enrollment. But year over year, like spring over spring, we're up in enrollment, right? We've exhibited double-digit gains in African American males, double-digit gains in Latinx and Latino males, right? Gains in new students, right? So there are indicators due solely to the hard work of our people across the state as community colleges that, again, we are stopping the bleeding. There's interest. People are wanting to come back. And to me, I want to hang my hat on that. I think to say that we're going to wash away, a decade's worth of enrollment declines over the course of a year is ludicrous and ridiculous too. This is the first academic year that we're fully back face to face. The rest of the country had a head start on us. I was in the Midwest. I was in Minnesota. We came back fall of 20. We were on campus, right? Spring of 21, we had 50% face to face, right? Later on that fall of 21, we were 75% because our union and administration were like, the hell with this. We got to get back because how do you do a hands-on program remotely, right? So, there were just extra cautious provisions taking place here in New England, specifically in Connecticut. And I just feel like there's been no grace given to us despite our circumstance, right? But again, indicators, students, interests, applications, things are up, things that we use to measure, activity and projections of enrollment. I think we can't just dismiss that despite the craziness. Like, we're doing good work and people are roaring back, but it's not going to be all of them, within, an academic year. So again, I agree with you. There's some challenges and we're working on that, but we are seeing positive signs, like tangible positive signs now. And to me, we need more of that.
Mary Beth?
Hi, yeah, thank you for being here. I'm an non-talk faculty member, so you're at my campus today. I'm not though. I'm at home today. But I just had a comment, not really a question, because I think all the questions that Kalina has to ask are much more specific. But I think my comment is just that what I'm hearing a lot of is that there's a lack of communication, and faculty and staff feel like they're always playing catch up on the newest thing that's happening, like a new change that's coming out, or a new program, or a new system, like, for example, like the waitlisting thing that we just heard about after it was already on the schedule. So it just seems like, I'm wondering from your perspective, like, what can you do to sort of shore up the communication, because I think that's causing a lot more anxiety than needs to be. Because if people knew what was happening, there would be less of a sense of anxiety about the transfer to CT State. So I'm just wondering, in terms of your perspective about communication, have you heard that, and what are you doing to try to solve some of those issues?
Yeah, I mean, let's call it what it is. We hear about communication challenges all the time. And I think communication challenges will always be on the table. I think for starters, when we hear that, so thank you for that comment. And obviously your question, like, we have to listen to it and accept it, that regardless if we are communicating, right? If people feel dissatisfied or continue to feel blindsided, then we have to come up with better strategies, right? Like a strategic plan. We've stood up governance, and I admire and respect the president of the College Senate, Professor Vandermark, right? Because she doesn't mince any words, and she'll give it to me when she feels like it. So she's a strong advocate and working in partnership with our governance bodies, both at the state level, but also locally, to say, okay, how should we communicate? What are the vehicles that we should communicate? How frequently? What are the different modalities? So that at the end of the day, our people feel that, hey, I get the information, I see it, but also too, there's a vehicle for me to respond immediately and say, hey, I still have questions and challenges or whatever. Like, we're always going to be committed to communicate more, but also communicate effectively for the needs of our people. So I think the more we hear it, but it starts with us accepting it and saying, okay, and really putting the baton in your hand and saying, okay, what should be the best approach to better communicate, right? So people feel like they're on the same page and they're not catching up. So it starts with me to work with our administration and make sure that we're willing to do that. But also, even when we communicate, right, we have to check for quote unquote understanding and circling back and saying, hey, did it work? Are there questions? If so, what are they? Let's continue to work on that. That's the only way we're going to do this, because this is a monster of a process. So I would be lying to you to say we're gonna implement things and everything's gonna be fine. Of course not. especially in complicated organizations. So, it starts with us setting that tone. We communicate, but if people are feeling like it's not working, then we're willing to do more and do it differently. So it does penetrate the various corners, of our campuses and colleges for people to feel supported and heard.
Should we get back to the list, or is anybody
Okay,
else?
so I would love to stay, but now I'm gonna go with 90 and head to Norwalk for any of you who are in Norwalk right now. So I'll see you at 3 for a lovely open forum about the budget. So again, thank you, Professor Sasanker and everyone else. I appreciate you. My only request is, are you willing to provide, even asking the question, but provide that master list of questions so that if there's a need for more detailed follow-up, expand discussions, we can also provide that as well.
Absolutely.
Please. Okay. Awesome. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Bye.
Bye. All right. So next question. Was DegreeWorks tested before it became available to students? If so, by whom? And what was the standard of accuracy set to authorize its release? And had requests for the same question about the schedule and banner, etc., but DegreeWorks in particular for now.
Sure, and I can tackle the DegreeWorks question. So we've been working on DegreeWorks as well as One College Banner for several years now, and we did very intensive testing prior to the launch. I guess my question would be to clarify what you mean by I guess more information regarding what your concerns are, because I will say DegreeWorks is a tool that reflects the curriculum in the catalog. So I will just kind of start with that point. So we work very close with academic affairs to make sure what is in the catalog is in DegreeWorks. And as we get updates to the catalog and curriculum, DegreeWorks is then updated as well. So I mean, I would love for additional context just to kind of better answer your question.
Yeah, I'm sure we can get a couple of examples from the group. John has his hand up. Go ahead, John.
Yes, hi, John Anderson, professor of English and co-coordinator of the Pathway to Teaching Careers program at Quinnebog. Part of this came up, I think, out of discussion with the Pathway to Teaching Careers degree in DegreeWorks. I sat down with my co-coordinator, Denise Walsh, and GP advisors, and we looked at the new DegreeWorks for Pathway to Teaching Careers, and it wasn't even close. I mean, it didn't resemble the degree at all. And so I was alarmed by this, and I sent an email to Mike Stefanovitz, I think, and Brad Davis, and I have to say, they were immediately responsive because it was changed quickly. But I was thinking about students who are maybe already in the process or students, looking at DegreeWorks. So I don't know, that was just like a discrete example, but it seemed to indicate to me that if Pathway to Teaching Careers, as students were starting to register, could be so far off that maybe there were other problems going on.
Sure, and I'm wondering if maybe my colleagues in academic affairs can kind of jump in and talk
Yeah.
about the curriculum process.
Yeah, let me jump in here for just a second. John, thank you for raising this issue. I think this is very important. Let me just clarify a few things. So the DegreeWorks platform, again, is a platform of 12 merged into one. So you're taking all the curriculum that we had previously, and we're now programming in the new CT state programs. The problem is the data is only as good as the data we have. And so as things went through the curriculum alignment process, we built the programming according to what was in those documents. The problem is once the catalog is created, there are some nuances and details that are not necessarily clear in all of the documentation that came through the APRC process. And you're talking thousands of courses. It was 1,700 plus courses, 300 plus degrees and programs. So in September of this year, a transitional catalog was sent. It was sent internally to all internal constituents, informing folks of what the new catalog is and asking folks across the board to look at the catalog, look for errors, look at the programs, and let us know as soon as possible. During that month, I think that was around September 12th or something, and it was available for feedback until mid-October or early October until it was going to be publicly available. In that time frame, we got about 300 responses from faculty across the colleges. It was a lot, but not nearly as much as what was needed. At that point, the catalog was then publicly released in October. Again, in draft stage, it is still marked in draft stage because we repeatedly over and over asked campuses, asked program coordinators and faculty to review the catalog and let us know if there were issues with curriculum. So as the programming information was sent to us, we've been updating it. So we're just trying to clarify that this is an iterative process and we know that there are challenges, but even once all the program information is identified, that doesn't answer the question of how students transition clearly from a legacy program to a new. So there's a separate piece of that that's behind the scenes and it's program crosswalks. So what the program, and there are two different types of crosswalks. There are course crosswalks and program crosswalks. So I don't mean to get into the weeds, but I think this is helpful to set the stage. So the program crosswalks, we started asking program coordinators as early as last spring, so more than a year ago, to provide for us crosswalks of information from the legacy program to what information we had for the new programs. And any feedback the program coordinator thought would be helpful to then inform advising decisions on what a student might transition into if they've already taken courses that was required in their legacy program and how it would fit into the new. Now, many program coordinators provided that information, many did not. That information was all put into databases in SharePoint that was available to campuses. We had regular updates with your campus deans. We meet with the deans on a weekly basis, every one of the 12 campuses. And we convey information that the expectation is that's forwarded on to your faculty. There is no mechanism, there's no technology platform available to us at this point to be able to email directly to every single faculty member without emailing the entire college community. So every staff member, every custodian, every police officer. So just getting messaging to faculty is a challenge because we have to go through the folks on the campuses that have the right distribution lists. So there are some challenges there. But the reality is we've been asking for this information. The crosswalks are populated. We put them into share drives that folks could then update in real time. So I think part of the challenge is not all the information was conveyed to every campus member. Not all the information was gathered accurately. And it's not really until you're in real time when students actually start registering and sitting down that I think even some folks thought through some of the pieces that they didn't realize they didn't know. And so there's no finger pointing here. This is just the nature of this type of a transition. It's complicated, it's messy, and there's so much information to gather. So the processes are improving. Nobody's here to say that they're great and they're streamlined. This is a transition in process. But I just want you to understand some of the pieces behind how that information has been gathered, the extensive lengths we've gone to try to get the right information, and just understanding there's a very small team here in New Britain working on this on behalf of hundreds and hundreds of folks on the ground.
Right. And
so I see John's hand goes back up again.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. First of all, thank you for that answer. And I want you to know I do appreciate all the work that the massive amount of work that must be done behind the scenes to make these huge transitions. I do want just state on the record that we did our due diligence with Pathway to Teaching Careers. You know, we went through the APRC process, et cetera. We did notice some errors in the catalog a little later on that we probably should have picked up. This isn't an excuse, but there is a feeling of being a bit overwhelmed among faculty with emails, committee assignments, and everything has a red alert on it. So yeah, that's not an excuse, but there were a few small pieces missing, but most of what needed to be in Pathway to Teaching Careers, which is a very complex degree, it was in there. But thank you.
So again, no finger pointing here. There's just a lot of factors. We just kind of set the stage to understand what's happening behind the scenes.
Okay, so there's two more hands, Manuel and Gail, but just before we get there, just what I'm not hearing, like who is ultimately responsible for the accuracy of each of these programs? And how do we contact the person who is ultimately going to confirm that this is accurate? And the next question maybe can be rolled into the following responses, which is, what % of the program information on your office would you estimate is accurate, or do you even have an estimation at this point?
So I can kind of go reverse. So 100% of the information that has been shared with us by campus faculty is what has been programmed. So the question is, it's the program coordinators on the campuses to give us the information if there is something incorrect, whether that's crosswalk information for advising tools, because you can't program every single possible substitution and what a student may have taken before that was previously required versus how it might substitute into the new. But there's guidance that can be provided. And so there are places where there's substitution guidance that we've put out there, how individual substitutions can take place, how batch substitutions, if there are ones that apply to multiple students. But part of the challenge is every PC on every campus has to do this exercise because every campus has a different, potentially different legacy program coming into the CT state program. So you can't have one accounting professor on one campus giving advice on behalf of the other 12 or the other 11, because it may have been a different accounting program at the other 11 campuses. So it really is the minutia of every single program coordinator who owned the curriculum locally to look at what was the crosswalk advisement, the guidance for your legacy programs into the new aligned programs.
Okay, so I might not be following here, but if I'm understanding the situation correctly, students have access to DegreeWorks, which is supposed to guide them in their enrollment choices for next semester. And we are at a point where we are implementing a policy where if a course is not in their program of study, their financial aid will actually kick it back. And we're not actually going to have financial aid awards until the middle of the summer. So if there is a problem with financial aid, we won't find out until then. But the information that students have been given is, as you describe it, incorrect for a multitude of reasons, simply because of the complexity or no. The DegreeWorks.
The information is
not giving
correct based on what campuses have provided to us. So if there's a program that has an error, the program coordinator needs to notify us, and then we have to go back and verify it through what was approved through APRC. So we can't just take it on face value that, oh, well, we think it should have been this instead of this. We have to go back and see what went through governance and was approved. And some folks may not have agreed with the decision, but that was the decision of the group that was on behalf of that particular program.
Okay, so I know that we had Manuel's hand and Gail's hand and Andre's hand is up.
My comment was in relation to previous point of conversation regarding testing for DegreeWorks, One College Banner, and scheduling. And I just wanted to add that there was testing for DegreeWorks and One College Banner, both in virtual formats as well as in person, with representative groups participating in those conversations. The data migration from the 12 legacy instances of Banner to the One College Banner instance involved millions of data lines, and that those data transfers were made with an accuracy of initially over 97%. And as we were coming to the end of those points of data migration, the accuracy was as high as 99.9. And there are all of the complexities of moving from the 12 legacy Banner instances to the One College Banner instance. But I think in many instances, as we talk, for example, about DegreeWorks, we are working with the same iteration of DegreeWorks in One College Banner as we were working with in the 12 legacy instances. However, we had used it in distinct ways at each of our campuses. And so it may feel different depending on which campus you may be sitting. Going back to Mary Beth's comment regarding wait lists connected with the schedule, we had several of the colleges that were using wait lists prior to the release of the fall schedule. And we had many of the colleges who had not used wait lists. And so to the degree that those processes have been used in one college and not the other, it will feel different for some of us, depending on which campus we are. And the selection of courses that are waitlisted in the fall schedule is minimal. Those were courses that were selected in conversations with our deans, and they in turn had conversations with their faculty. I know that it's tough for everyone to participate in every single conversation that is going on. But again, as we are using the waitlist process right now, it's on a pilot process to learn how it can inform the schedule process as we move forward. And we learn to live with a single schedule that serves students at our 12 colleges. But again, just wanted to emphasize that how we experience some of the features of the technology we're using right now may feel different, even if some of our colleges or some of our peers are looking at processes that were quite familiar to them before. So thank you.
I think my hand was next.
Go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Manuel for bringing that up because yes, it is the same version of DegreeWorks from 12 college to 1. It may look different because each college customized the aesthetics of how the DegreeWorks looked, but the functionality is the same from legacy to 1 college. I also want to talk a bit about, I think one of the concerns is brought up, and I'm sure it's on your list of questions, Kalina, is regarding course substitutions and making sure students aren't losing courses or having the degree audits look different from 12 college to 1 college. We've received to date, I believe, over 500 individual course substitutions that we've received to assist students in this process. And we've also worked on what we call blanket course substitutions. And we did cover this more in our webinar earlier this week that I hope you were able to attend. But blanket substitutions are essentially if you notice students in your program have a specific course that everybody across the board is going to need a substitution for, we can do a blanket substitution that would help all of your students. So we have to date received, I believe, over 40 blanket substitutions that will impact over 75 programs. So I think to your point, it is a work in progress. The more information we receive, is the quicker we can update audits to make sure students are seeing an accurate audit for their program of study for the fall. So I believe you will see a difference even from when registration launched on April 4th to today and how the audits look for your students. And that is thanks to the collaboration we see from our partners in academic affairs and making sure we're getting updated information and put it into DegreeWorks in a timely manner.
Thanks. Andre?
Yeah, first of all, standing up governance, actually, I'm on one of the SAC committees. We're just actually standing it up ourselves. This is all work in progress. The problem is, the basic problem was that this I think everybody didn't quite appreciate how complex a task conversion was going to be. And so we're kind of applying the Microsoft model where we go live and then have our customers do the debugging, and that's where we're at now. Now, the other problem in terms of getting faculty input onto the new catalog, well, part of the problem is that there was a hell of a lot of uncertainty and confusion as to what the academic structure was going to look like and who's going to be where and who's, so it was kind of difficult to figure out where to even turn to. For instance, and this is my specific problem today, I have a student who's been following the general studies program at Tonstas, and all of a sudden half his courses don't count for anything. Okay, so there's a general substitution is going to work, but I have to do with several, I think 5 or 6 specific substitutions. And does it matter which what do I equate them to? I mean, it's like sort of throw up head or tails of it. I mean, it's like there is no model, and I don't think we have a coordinator for general studies anymore. So who the hell do I turn to?
So Andre, I'll start and then others can jump in if this helps. So I hear you completely. And again, this is a local decision in terms of what those substitutions would be on that campus for that student from that legacy program. And in some programs, it's much larger than others. That's part of why we really are trying to arm the entire army of GPAs that are out there, the Guided Pathways advisors, with the information and the recommendation from coordinators or faculty on the campuses so that they can use that guidance for other students. I also want to just clarify too for everybody that we are obligated to a policy of do no harm to students as they go through this transition process. We all agree on this. We're in lockstep with the accrediting bodies and with our specialized accrediting agencies as well. Nobody wants a situation where students have the end line moved for them. You know, that they think the finish line here and now suddenly the finish line is there. And we understand that when they go from the legacy degree works that's looking at their legacy program audits to the new degree works that's looking at their new program audits, they have a sudden drop from, let's say, 90% completion down to 40 or 50 or 60% completion. It doesn't mean that's where they are. It means that each of those students needs to sit down with someone on their behalf, either in person or an advisor's working with them, a faculty advisor, a GPA advisor, to go through their degree audit and figure out, okay, everything that you've taken to date that was previously required for your degree that satisfied a requirement in your degree must have a home in the new degree. That means there may be some strange decisions on substitutions where, let's say you have a gen ed that's substituting for a program course. Well, that's going to happen for those students because we have to honor what was previously required and they've satisfied. So this is something that even our accrediting agencies are making sure that we are demonstrating that students are not experiencing any harm. So this is a moment in time that we do need to work through with each student. And there's a large volume. We understand that. It's unfortunately just part of the process.
Yeah, I understand all that. It's just that I don't know if we have a coordinator for general studies that I can get to approve. I mean, I'm not sure who. I mean, I can make these things. I can be creative. I can go ahead and fit them somewhere. But the problem is somebody supposedly has to approve this. I'm not sure who.
So to that point, and I'll go through it real quickly. There is a faculty resources, and if someone has the ability to drop in the chat, it's ctstate.edu/curriculum/resources. This is the website we're trying to drive as many faculty and staff to with all of the resources that we think folks will need to do any kind of advisement with students. It's got links to all of those crosswalks I talked about. It's got links to every course to course crosswalk, what the legacy courses are in the new CT state structure and vice versa.
What's that address again?
It's ctstate.edu/curriculum/resources. But also in there is a link about substitutions and how to do it. But in a quick answer to your question, my recommendation, this is what we've given to all the campus deans to forward on to their campus faculty, is we're asking the faculty in those areas to do, a spot check. So let's say 10% of the students in the program, pull those students down, do degree audits, and look to see what the patterns are for the most common substitutions that you're going to need. Provide that guidance to your campus dean so that they have that information in hand, especially as faculty go off contract. We need to have as much information as possible during the summer so we can provide the feedback for these substitutions. Ultimately, the substitutions are decided locally. So your campus dean is the final person that's making the decision on substitutions. Although a request was made to put an appeal process in place that then can also be escalated to one of the CT state deans statewide to make sure, let's say if one campus is approving it and another campus isn't, there's a conversation. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to put as many strategies in place. So my recommendation to anybody out there who's really struggling with the volume is if you know you have a dozen different common recommendations that work for your students, put them together in an email, send them to your campus dean. They will get them to us. You can also CC myself, CC Mike Stefanowitz and a couple of others, and we can get it to the right folks.
Okay.
Just one more comment.
Sorry.
You're talking about a huge increase in volume of work for faculty now.
Right.
The fact that we've done away with the the additional responsibilities for now majority of our faculty, that is a factor we have to consider.
Right. And the fact that they're going off contract in about 2 weeks.
Right.
And students currently have access to course audits that tell them that they are in a completely different place and needing completely different courses from what's accurate. So we're getting a little bogged down, but go ahead, Mary Beth and Mike, and then let's see if we can get back on some quick questions.
You just brought up the point that I was going to bring up, is that the students are already seeing, if they're logging in and they haven't talked to an advisor, a faculty or a GP advisor yet, and they're seeing their audits at this point, it's, you know, they're getting stressed out. And so that's, I guess that was just my point, but you brought that up already.
Just to help answer that one as well, unfortunately, I wish there was some great software tool that allows us to pick the constituents we need to communicate with and get the messages out right away, but it doesn't work that way. The best way that we found for reaching students is actually through the CRM Advise platform. And so that's something that all students and all advisors have access to. So that's where Gail's team has been sending a lot of that type of communication and messaging directly to students right through CRM Advise. Hey, don't panic when you see this, we'll meet with an advisor. Faculty aren't seeing it because faculty don't get the CRM Advise, but we're trying to do this as many forms as we can.
And I would also comment that, as we all know, students don't always check their emails. So we always send a text to students saying, please check your email for important information about your program. So we are doing it both ways. If there's additional methods you feel would be helpful, believe me, we're all ears, because we want to make sure we're relieving student anxiety as much as we can.
Okay, Mike, quickly, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Kalina. I just wanted to mention also an issue of course equivalencies, because that's feeding into some of the concerns raised in DegreeWorks. And Kalina, to your question earlier about DegreeWorks being correct, or what percentage. So DegreeWorks was programmed exactly off of what was in ACALOG when they did the programming over the winter. So the catalog was released. We asked for feedback and revisions. That included course equivalencies if a new course equaled a previous course. And DegreeWorks was programmed, and Banner was programmed to pick up course equivalencies. The example I use is English 101 or English 1010. We actually had 35 different versions of English 1010 in our former system. We had letters on our courses like English B101, English C101. We had English embedded sections. We had English honors sections. So all of that was programmed into Banner. And Banner was also programmed to have new numbers and old numbers. But we went off the paperwork that was submitted by the faculty who participated in our APRC process and did the alignment. What we're finding now is that some courses did not come forward in alignment, or faculty would like a course to be equivalent to a new course. But we did not know that, and we did not assume that. So we did not assume, for instance, that we should treat a child psychology in a program as equivalent to perhaps an adolescent psychology. I'm just using that as an example. Because those were different courses in the past, and they have different numbers, and they may be different courses now. But for purposes of a degree audit, or for purposes of a transition, those courses can be programmed as equivalencies if we know that. So one of the messages I'd just like to share today is that I want to thank everybody who's been sharing all this information. I've worked with a number of faculty across the system over the past month at many of our campuses. And I would encourage you to ask folks, and I think we've been very responsive when people tell me, oh, this course isn't exactly this new course, but it should count in the degree audit. Or these two courses really merge to become a new course, but for legacy students, we want to count these two past courses. Those are the nuances that the provost mentioned that could not have been programmed based on just what was in ACALOG going forward. And that's what we're responding to. I think Gail mentioned there's been over 1,000 tickets submitted through the DegreeWorks system. And a lot of these are these blanket substitutions or course equivalency issues. And unfortunately, as much as we test and we spot check students, there's going to be that one student that Andre worked with who was in general studies where things didn't quite line up. And each time that's shared with us, we can then program, we can look for a blanket substitution or a variance so that other students who have that situation, their audit improves and gets better. Unfortunately, there was no way to run every single student through a new DegreeWorks process or to somehow map 12, the old version of DegreeWorks to new. So I just wanted to share that if we have the information, to the provost's point, we can do programming, and we're doing lots and lots of it. And you know, your colleagues in New Britain and elsewhere are working really hard to improve this system for students as we get the information. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead again, Andre.
Yeah, the other thing is with the same student actually, she had an AP composition. In the old DegreeWorks, it was recognized, but in the new one, it wasn't. So how do I put that in?
Yeah, Andre, if you want to send me that degree audit or the student's ID, I can take a look at that and I can research why. You know, I mean, I will readily admit not everything is perfect. For some reason, maybe in AP literature, the way it was transferred in or was unique to Tunxus, it showed up in the old audit, but it isn't showing up in the new. And there's just, you know, there's a million different possibilities of how things came in. And also remember, each of the 12 colleges were doing things differently. So transferring credits were handled differently. Sometimes they were transferred in as exact course. Sometimes they were transferred in as elective courses. Again, not to point fingers, not to make excuses, but these are the issues that we're finding and we can work on to fix. So I'd be happy to, if you want to share that, Andre, you can email that to me. Or work with Jessica, your associate dean of faculty, and I've worked with her with a number of situations. We can try to troubleshoot that. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm gonna try to kind of get us into some questions that have more to do with sort of governance and structure, so we don't get too much into this curricular process, because clearly there's a lot of detail to sort out. I know you have webinars. I know that we're going to have to reach out again with this list of questions and get more from you. I will reiterate that I think it is a cause for concern that students have access to what they believe is a program audit for the school that they will be enrolled in fall. And the folks who are able to correct that information, I don't think there's a real estimate of how accurate that information they're getting actually is. But the folks who are able to do it are only on contract for the next 2 weeks and are currently probably up to their eyeballs in finals grading. So that is a bit of a problem, especially when you take into consideration the fact that financial aid is now going to hinge on the extent to which these programs are programmed correctly, and courses reflect as being part of that program. Very quick yes or no answer. This CPOS bit of software that we're going to be using to check to make sure that courses are within the program of study, do the universities use it? If so, what do they use for this function?
Yep. And I don't think we can speak for the universities, Kalina, but I just want to make a point of clarification on financial aid, and Tamika, you can confirm if I'm saying this correctly. Financial aid is not dispersed until after census, which is September 19th. So I wanted to make sure that folks in this call appreciate the fact that no financial aid is given out to students until after census, because we need to make sure we have an accurate idea of students who are currently enrolled and engaged in coursework, as well as in the appropriate program of study, and their courses align with that program of study. So I'm hoping that gives some relief to folks on this call regarding how that works. I also want to clarify that, you know, this is not a new federal regulation. We just now at DegreeWorks have a way to actually make sure we're maintaining compliance with a federal regulation. So I can't speak to how the universities are doing it. This is how the community colleges are, but again, it's predicated on that degree audit being accurate for the student, which is, I think, is why we are asking on this call for your cooperation and collaboration to make sure these audits are as clean as possible for students at that point of census on September 19th, so financial aid can disperse appropriately for our students. Tamika, did I capture that correctly?
I think you said that appropriately, Gail. Exactly.
And substituted courses also get factored into that, so that satisfies those CPOS requirements.
Let's see. So I think there was a webinar on Monday. I only caught part of it. If I heard correctly, let me see if I can find this question. There is a list. I just lost it. But there were a good number of students who were registered at 4 or 5 different campuses concurrently, and there have been efforts to, made to reach out, make sure that they had done it on purpose.
Correct.
And for the most part, it was. So what's the kind of number of students for doing that? And then, like, can we get a full report of that? And also, how is tuition apportioned if students are registered at multiple campuses in that way?
Sure. So we have somewhere around, I can give you estimates. I believe earlier in the week, we had around 2,200 students who were registered at multiple campuses. That number has, of course, grown since earlier in the week. We have been doing checks for students who are registered for 4, 5, and 6 campuses, just to make sure that these are actually intentional decisions. So we have gone through, in fact, student by student, line by line, to make sure that these look correct. So for example, if we see a student who's registered for traditional classes at 4 different campuses that aren't near each other in the state, that to me is a pause point to reach out to the student directly and confirm, was this your intention for registration? And if it was not your intention, let's make sure we assign you or match with courses that do meet your intention. So we are doing that on a weekly, or in some cases twice a week basis, to spot check that data to make sure that students are making the intentional choices. And I would say, of the students we've checked, I would say it's a very minute number that have caused additional follow-up with students who are registered for courses, again, who are, across the state from one another from a traditional setting.
What about the tuition question?
And I'm not entirely sure if you can repeat that for me, Kalina.
I mean, if a full-time student is registered at 6 different campuses, where does their tuition go?
Well, keep in mind, it is still TC State, so Tamika, if you want to.
Yep, that's accurate. It's still CT State, right? So we're able to capture, as long as the student is registered for the appropriate amount of courses to receive their set amount of financial aid, they'll still get that. It's not a disruption for them to be registered at multiple campuses. They do have a home designated campus, but again, that does not negate their ability to get financial aid for attending courses at multiple campuses.
Gotcha. I'm less concerned about their ability to get financial aid, because I know that they're designating a home campus. More concerned with the viability of our individual campuses if we're sharing courses quite this widely. At some point, we're being told that, funding for the system is down, and they're looking at possible campus closures, et cetera. There's very little way to see whether, the tuition that goes into a campus and then the resources that come out of other, like how are we going to be managing these resources? Is there any particular plan, or?
Kalina, on those ones, unfortunately, Carrie Kelly, who's our finance officer, is not able to make this call, so we'd have to defer to their shop, because we don't get into those.
Yep,
pieces.
I would. Yep, absolutely.
All right. Next question. How many GPAs were hired, and then how many remain now?
The GPAs actually don't report to either of either Tamika or myself. So I don't actually have those numbers, and I'm not sure if Tamika does either.
I don't have clarity on those numbers, Kalina, so we would definitely want to check in with HR to provide accurate information on that end.
Was anybody involved in hiring of GPAs, plan for GPAs? The next question is just, what was the initial plan to fund those positions? And then what is the current plan?
Yeah, I think that is, again, a Carrie Kelly question from a finance standpoint. So as long as we're able to gather those questions, we can share them with her.
Okay. Is that Mike, go ahead.
Well, I would just say that unfortunately, Mike Bacilli is out today, and he probably could have answered these questions. And just in general, I would find it helpful if we could receive the questions in advance. If you'd like to have discussions on items like this, we may have been able to gather that data had we known. So we could have had guests attend as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I apologize. It's a very busy time of the year. We've talked about all the challenges, and we actually got together yesterday when we realized that you all would be accompanying President Maduko, because these sorts of questions are the questions that you all can answer. So we put them together just late last night. So had we realized that Dr. Maduko would only be here for a few minutes, and that we would be able to have some of these more detailed sort of design of the system questions answered, we certainly would have shared them ahead of time.
We could always come back. We'd always be happy to come back if you'd like, Colleen, at a future
Yeah.
meeting.
And I will say that while I understand that technically that's a Carrie Kelly question, it is and it isn't. It was the design was an enrollment projection based on research on particular implementations of guided pathways. That was not a CFO decision, but a guided pathways design decision. So that's I think really where we would prefer the answer to come from. What were the projections, and then what are they now?
Yeah, and Kalina, I know that CFO Ben Barnes was involved in some of those discussions at the time. I know there was a cost benefit analysis with a return on investment calculation. I believe some of that information may have been shared with the board at the time.
It was
When there was
$25 million that would pay for itself by fiscal year 25. That's what that was.
Oh, okay, so if you're looking for more clarification than that, maybe you might wish to invite Ben to talk. I mean, I do know that COVID, has interrupted things and those projections may have changed, but I'm glad you have access to that original information. Thank you.
Yeah, we've gone back and forth on that many times. All right, does anybody else want to jump in or suggest a direction for these questions? I know that all of our committee members have access to the questions, so anyone want to make a suggestion? All right, and Mike, I assume you just took your hand down. Sometimes things go in reverse. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay, curricular oh, go ahead, David.
It's just the question about the guided pathway advisors. I'm on the finance committee and infrastructure committee of the board, and that was a question which I asked Ben Barnes on a number of occasions, because it was pretty clear that the hiring of up to 174, if I recall the number, I could stand being corrected here, was going to come out of soft money, out of ARPA funding due to the COVID pandemic. And the question which I asked, and I asked a number of times, was how would that be funded for FY24 when that money would not be available, and when in fact, additionally, pilot projects had not been carried out. And the response, as I recall, which Ben Barnes gave, but I'll stand corrected if he has a different analysis of it now, was that, well, programs would have to be canceled in order to compensate for the funds, or alternatively, the figure which Kalina mentioned, and I think was an increase of up to 25% in retention. And that's not a finance committee question. That's a question for those folks in academic affairs. Has that been achieved? That's just the other response was, well, the GPAs will pay for themselves in additional retention and increase, therefore, numbers of enrollment.
Thank you for sharing that, Professor Blitz. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to speak on behalf of Ben or anyone else, but I can, I just want to bring us back to some of the challenges that we've seen during this time frame since 2019 with enrollment challenges, right? Is that this was a very unique time, and I think projections that may have been made, early on definitely weren't able to come to fruition during this time as we tried to tackle a lot of other challenges that were occurring with students and trying to maintain enrollment. So I know on the outset, we've tried to really look at our enrollment projections and make adjustments based on the reality of where we are, whether that's inclusive of the work that staff and faculty are doing across the board, not just specific to guided pathways advisors. I know we have seen some positive retention from them being in place, and really transitions of a lot of process as well has supported that. But I can't speak clearly to the fact of how much how much ROI has come to fruition during this time period.
Do you have that data, Tamika? Do you have campuses with the guided pathways phase in versus the campuses without, and what their retentions rate by comparison were?
We can get you some data on specific to our guided pathways and retention, I think, for our continuing students. So we can pull some data, Kalina, and share that with this group.
Okay. And I'll just say that there were 141 unclassified staff recruitments in this fiscal, for the first half of this fiscal year. I suspect a good number of them were probably in that category. So that's not ancient history, this type of thing, right? As recently as the very last budget session, we recruited ARPA funding for the specific purpose of hiring. And I also want to make sure that we understand that none of us is disparaging the work of our guided pathways advisors so much as maybe questioning the level of preparation that we had to onboard them, to integrate them, to have the pathways for them to guide students through, have the adequate, curriculum available for them to advise students, et cetera. So I just want to make that very clear. That is, the reason that we're asking this question, and it's rooted in projections that were made quite a few years ago, but
if I can jump in too, and I just want to say, I think you're making really good points, and I don't think anybody's here to disagree with the points that you're making. I just want to make sure everybody's aware. Most of the decision makers that were around the table that came up with those projections and so forth are no longer around the table. And so over the past year, those of us who have been in these roles for a much shorter period of time, we have been pivoting and adjusting based on the more realistic realities of where we are as a CT state and what strategies need to be put into place to move forward. And some of those things, they may or may not have been ideal decisions, but they were the decisions that were made and actions that were taken that we then have to pivot and work with. So I think Dr. Meduco and others are doing everything they can to really relook at the decisions of the past and figure out which pieces do we retain, which pieces do we sunset, which pieces can we pivot immediately, and which take a little bit more time. There's contract issues and so forth involved. So points well made. We hear you.
Thank you, Andre.
Yeah, there's a general problem here, and that is that indeed there were a lot of decisions made which were, put it kindly, not the best. And the people that made those decisions have gone on to other things and bear absolutely zero consequences of their foolishness. Is there some way that we can reach out and claw back the money we paid them or something else, or have them pay some kind of penance for the crap that they left us?
I wish there was. I can't speak to that.
All right. Let's see, because I think we should start to wrap up, and a lot of these we will forward to you. I'll ask this: there are quite a volume of last-minute curricular and policy changes to be addressed before July 1st. How many of those do you anticipate will actually be processed before the deadline? Or rather, how many do you think might go undone? Where are we with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Are you talking about governance, or are you talking about the substitutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of things that had to make their way through curriculum, through Senate, get to the board.
I can speak to that piece of it. In terms of the substitutions and so forth, as soon as we receive them, they're getting processed. So the expectation is that they would all be processed in real time. In terms of governance, obviously governance only goes as fast as it goes, but I am thrilled by the progress that has been made. There were several items that were really flagged as priority items that had to get through governance because they needed to go to the board for board action this cycle in order to make it for the catalog for the fall. Those items have made it through, and those items have already gone forward. There was really only one academic program that did not get aligned for CT State. It was a standalone program at one of the campuses in an allied health area. That was a unique program that has now been brought forward into the CT State alignment. So that needs approval through the board in their upcoming June meeting. And so all the other pieces that are in the governance process, if they're courses, those are things we handle internally. They don't have to go to the board for approval. And items that are below threshold are informational items to the board, and they certainly would be forwarded as informational items. It's the ones above threshold that require action, and those ones have moved forward. There are also several key policy information where policies were aligned or policies were recommended to be updated, where let's say, old board language really did not reflect CT state and just could not work in a single college structure. Those critical policies have gone forward either prior to this semester in the transitional process or this semester through the Senate process. And they too are getting into the board agenda for June. So the real critical items have gone forward. The others will just have to move forward in the timeline that they move forward.
Do those governance bodies have bylaws yet?
You'd have to speak to each one. I think Senate is a lot closer to having more solid bylaws. I think Congress is still working on it. They have sort of a transitional plan in place at the moment, but they're working through that independently.
Okay. The other question I think I'd really, oh, go ahead, Tamika.
I just did not want to be rude, Kalina and the rest of the group, but we do have another meeting, Gail and I, that we do have to cut to. So I wanted to prioritize what your next question is.
Okay.
If there was anything else that pertained to us.
I'm not sure. I'm going to throw it out there, but I doubt any of you will have this number. I think this might be a Carrie Kelly question. So, in the interest of making sure everyone has a last minute opportunity to ask any questions, make any comments before, you all have to leave, let's just do that and we'll forward these to you. Anybody want to, Andre?
Yeah, what we ought to do is at least give them the list of questions that we have, and they can answer the ones that were not asked now. They can answer down the road. Okay.
Absolutely. We will forward that to you right after this meeting. So, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Kalina, can I provide, are we all signing off? I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, you can, sure. I mean, stick around for another few minutes. We should probably wrap up at 2:30.
There was just one other thing I just wanted to clarify because it came up earlier and I don't think we actually gave a number. In terms of enrollment, and of course, Tamika just left, so it's too bad. In terms of enrollment, we are actually at par, if not slightly above par, of where we should be right now compared to previous semesters for enrollment. And that's even considering the fact that it started slightly later than it planned. To address some of the issues that had come up. And I think it's 70% of the students who have registered have actually registered online. So they're successfully navigating the online platform.
71%, Maya, but I just want to put that 71 to 29. Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I think, Kalina, you were asking earlier too about what percentage are from multiple campuses. I think it's about 21% that are from multiple campuses, but the majority of those are because students are taking online classes at multiple campuses. So it's a smaller number of how many students are signing up for traditional classes at multiple campuses. I hope that information is helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
And earlier, Gail mentioned that some students had registered at 6 campuses. I just wanted to clarify that was one student that registered at 6 campuses, while we had 22 students that registered at 5 campuses and 144 students that registered at 4. And then we've had over 1,700 students that register at 2 campuses. And that's the most common. And I think, again, online and L-Run are the modalities for which most of these students are registering for when registering on multiple campuses. And as Maya mentioned, as of today, we are at par year to year with last fall, even though our schedule opening our registration was April 4th. And in the last year, in the last cycle for 2022, we had colleges that opened registration 2 and 3 weeks earlier than that. So it's reassuring that our students are learning to navigate the new technology and the new look of it. It does present itself differently than previously, and to the fact that it does present differently, it becomes a challenge to those students as they acclimate to it, but they're learning to use it. And again, over 71% of our registrations have happened online, and we're hoping that some of the issues that we've identified, like for example, the fact that our current iteration of Illusion used for registration has issues with Safari as a navigational tool. But those issues do not translate to Google or Edge or Firefox. So a student that may own a Mac, if they use Google or Firefox or Edge to register, then those issues go away. And again, we're hoping that that technology issue with the navigational tool with Safari will be resolved by Illusion, which is again not something that we can modify. But again, just wanted to reassure and share with you that to date we're at par year to year with where we were last year in 2022. And thank you for the invitation to have us here today. We look forward to answering some of your other questions as you share them with us.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.
Wow. So do we need to do anything else, or is it motion to adjourn?
We have a few things to do.
We got, yeah, finances,
We do, yeah,
That's it.
that whole budget thing.
yes.
A report of the chair and vice chair should be pretty straightforward. I think the sort of most system-wide notable thing for ASA is that in response to the issue that, oh, hold on, Lois, you want to, okay, go ahead before I get into that.
No, I just want to say that I'm going to have to check myself into some psychological facility because I have had to go through this 4 times in the last week with these people. 4 times, and I, it sent me right over the edge. I just need to let you know that.
Right, but you have to be careful what you say, because I have an administrative investigation going on for what I said last meeting.
You're kidding.
There's an investigation going on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Seriously?
Oh, that's why you
Seriously.
said that.
Oh my God.
Oh, goodness. I'm sorry, Andre.
Well, hey, I think it's so much horseshit that I'm not really afraid, but I do believe that someone wants to develop a case for firing me for cause, since I'm tenured, so the only way to get rid of me.
Wow.
Andre, I think that you made a,
This is the second investigation. The prior one was another, not related to this meeting, but another meeting. So.
Wow.
Kalina, this is Jen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We had this planned in advance, right? That everyone was just able to come to the meeting and they knew the time frame of the meeting. And was it just kind of like another, oh, we knew we had this on our calendar, but we rescheduled all these other things, so we have to leave kind of thing? Because it's very frustrating. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to statewide committee meetings of various things, and the same thing happens over and over again. And so everybody pulled together and got questions organized and stuff, and then the point is, well, send me these questions later, or we'll come back to the meeting. But it's like such a lack of respect for our time. And I think we all would have met at a different time that would have, been appropriate. But I feel like there needs to be some type of comment made about the fact that, I'm on sabbatical and I'm here and I'm a faculty person, and I don't understand how we could just not call out the blatant disrespect, because we could have rescheduled the whole meeting, in my opinion. Thanks for hearing my 2 cents. I can't believe this happened today. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lois.
I absolutely agree with what Jen said when we were talking last night and found out that he was going to be at Asnuntuck at 12:30, and then he was going to be at Norwalk at 3 o'clock. And then he was supposed to be with us at 1 o'clock, and we're going, how in the heck is he doing all this? And why didn't he tell us? And why didn't he try and reschedule if he had to do these things? And this is showing us how little respect he has for any of us.
I would say that we could take into consideration that we are all currently dealing with a really urgent budget crisis, and a lot of his running from campus to campus has to do with addressing that and the fact that people are genuinely disturbed, not sure what's going on, etc. That said, wait, let me just finish.
Okay.
That said, that speaks to precisely the level of challenge that we're currently facing that causes us to be so skeptical, and the reason that we need to have this conversation in the first place. Because in this mad scramble, this entire thing feels like a zombie with his head cut off, and it has for a very long time. It keeps lurching forward, and no one takes full responsibility for what it is. Everybody points to somebody else. They talk about the inadequacies of the technology, but nobody asks the question, is this responsible? No one. And that is very difficult to deal with. And I think it's probably the reason that all of us kind of just want to go take a nap right now.
And I fully agree with you, Kalina, but he could have had the word I want is what politeness to tell you and David ahead of time that he could only be here for a half hour or whatever it was. And if we had known that, if you had known that, we would have worked around it somehow, but to not do that, that just so shows his lack of respect for any of us and for this committee and for everything. I'm sorry. We knew this was going to happen last night, or we thought this was probably going to happen last night when we all talked about what we knew, where he was supposed to be at each time. But for him not to have said something?
Andre?
Yeah, if you listen to the answer he gave us to the key question that you led with, he really didn't answer. There was no answer. It was a lot of gobbledygook, because basically he doesn't have an answer. He's hoping that somehow he can win the battle over the budget, but it doesn't look very good. And he's not exactly plugged into all the political situation in Connecticut, as far as I could tell. So, it doesn't look good. Now, so perhaps, I mean, I don't know if you want to, but perhaps this might be a good time to try to get a meeting with Susan. Yeah, I don't know, because it doesn't look good. I mean, it's just, it looks pretty bleak. Granted, we've been in these kinds of situations before, and somehow we managed to get saved at the very last minute. But that's not terribly comforting, and his words certainly weren't very comforting either. I don't know.
Okay. Any last conversation about this for the moment? I feel the need to kind of process, not because I got new information, but I guess because maybe I didn't. I don't know. We all know where we've been. We're still there. I don't know if the university folks are as alarmed as we are, or go ahead, Ron.
Hey, Kalina, I'm sorry I was late, but I explained to you why. I'm also in my car, so
yeah.
I'm not driving, so just in case anyone's worried about that. But I'm just wondering how we as faculty hold any of these people accountable. They did not take any accountability for anything they said. Again, I missed the first hour or so, but there was no accountability. They were trying to blame HR. They were trying to blame people who no longer work there. They could, they were like little like rats trying to throw other rats under the bus or whatever. And how can we as a kind of a system-wide governance body, how could we hold some of these people accountable? Because we know Mike Stefanowicz okay, is responsible for much of this stuff, and he refused to take responsibility for it. Mike Buccelli couldn't show up. We know he's responsible for it. We know Gail's responsible for it. It's not just people who have left, okay? And so I'm just curious as to what we as is there something that this body can say to hold these people responsible for the mess that they've created?
Well, it was very convenient that those consolidation committees that we withdrew from, which were led by a good number of the people who were on this call today, did not make their minutes either accurate or public, right? But I think we can still identify who was in charge of what at that point, right? And look, the blame is beside the point. Who has the solutions?
I have a follow-up to that real quick because I didn't get a chance to watch the governor's remarks, but I heard about them. Things have been busy for me, but do you think the governor takes that position because he feels like the leadership is so problematic? Is there a connection there?
I think he has been told by this system for years on end, give us the money to get this consolidation going and we're going to produce savings. I mean, we can find any number of video clips from testimony at the Higher Ed Committee, from various board documents that demonstrate that that was the promise that was made. He's just asking us to fulfill the promise, right? And what was the money allocated to the cost of doing this? Like we just discussed, what would be required of us in the next 2 weeks, right? Just to sort of keep up with the level, the volume of work it would take to get some of this stuff accurate. But no money was allocated to the building of the 5th largest community college in the country. None. So this budget crisis that we're in, either this actually did cost some money, or it costed a lot of unpaid labor or something. But the fact is, promises were made to the governor and he's just asking us to follow through. Nobody has told him the truth. That the thing that he envisions for a community college not only does not perform the functions that he wants for workforce, but also that we would kill the universities if we were relegated to only those functions, because a huge portion of their enrollment is transfer from our college ready courses. So like somebody needs, but he has been misinformed for many years by our administration. Yeah. And so I don't hold him fully responsible. It's our job. And I don't see the actions of our past administration or of the board as it was previously constituted as ever amounting to protecting or growing the system. This is the logical end of the track that we've been on. This is not surprising to any of us. So there's Lois, Ron, and Andre.
Elena, I am going to hold him responsible as well, because Stephen Adair and I, for the first 3 or 4 years that this consolidation started in 2017 and went forward, attempted numerous times to get appointments with him to talk to him, and the furthest we got was at one point we got an appointment with his chief of staff at the time, and I don't even remember who his name was, and he just played us. And that's as close as we ever got to him. He was not interested in listening to us. He had the opportunity. We tried, there were a number of us, not only Stephen and I, a number of us tried to talk to him and get him to understand, just to talk to him, to tell him what's going on. Wasn't interested in listening.
Well, there was a whole entire what do you call it, billboard, if I remember correctly, trying to get his attention. Right? Sorry, Ron and Andre.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to go back to what you said earlier, Kalina, about not casting blame but finding solutions. I think as long as the people who got us into this mess are the people we're looking to get us out of this mess, that solutions are impossible. until the people who caused this problem take accountability and resign from their positions, okay, they're simply not competent. And to expect them to be able to adopt solutions, even if the solutions are given to them by us, first of all, they've demonstrated for 5 years that they won't listen to us. Okay, so I do think accountability is part of the solution. I do think we need to speak out and call people out for the mistakes that they've made.
Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, I would like to as well. On the other hand, from a practical perspective, if we do get some of these people to resign, who the hell's going to replace them? They're going to be appointed again. You know, when I describe this problem to my friends, they ask, "So why are they doing this to us?" And the only answer I can come up with is either some of them, like Ojakian, has some political ambitions and wants to put on a resume that he happened to, I don't know, save the community college system in Connecticut by merging 10, 12 into one, or they're just getting jobs for their friends, okay? I can't see any other motivation. So if we get rid of them, who the hell's going to, I mean, again, it'll be the same kind of people that will be appointed that are not, you know, they're not competent. In fact, what the hell? All of them are of course, if I say that again, I'm going to, you know, have another investigation.
I'll say it for you. They're incompetent.
Thank you. So I don't know. On the other hand,
And I think that
maybe we could just pick on one or two of them and take our revenge on them. I don't know.
well, I mean, look, these are problems of bureaucracy, but like the problem amounts to theft on multiple levels. We're taking taxpayer dollars, investing it in building a thing that amounts to a reduction in the quality of their services. Like, why? And somebody should be accountable for that at some point. And honestly, it's nobody in any particular job description. It's, I mean, this is about leadership of the state. This is about allocation of tax dollars. This is about a lot of different things. I should probably just stop talking because I don't know why I'm so jarred by all of this, other than, I mean, I have no idea, but I'm definitely a little more than a little annoyed. Yeah, Blitz, save me.
Let me jump in and say that I'm ready to do my report from the Finance Committee on the whole budget question, just to make, you know, the rest of our day even happier.
Yay, yes, and let me just get mine out of the way because it'll take 10 seconds,
Okay.
Which is if you click on the hyperlink under reports of chair and vice chair on the new program forms, you will see a response to our concerns last time about the situation at Eastern. So the program forms have actually been changed so that there are check boxes that require that people actually attest to the fact that these curricular products have gone through all the levels of shared governance that are necessary before they get to the board. Again, I just want to thank our provost and the academic and student affairs committee, because that is the kind of response that we hope for, and it's, I think, unique in the way that that they were so responsive and this is going to be effective. So that's it for my report. On to the doom, Blitz.
Okay, let me see if I can share. Yes. Is that the PDF I'm sharing now? Hang on, sorry. Let me do this again. Okay. Yeah, this is the famous, you know, we discussed at the Finance Committee, and I can't see what's happening here. I'm hoping that when I change to a different page, you can see that as well.
Well, you know,
yep. Now,
yes.
the page. All right. This was the report that Ben Barnes gave to the Finance Committee when we met on Wednesday. So it's just a couple of days old. And this is the whole question of the deficit and preliminary mitigation plan. I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but I think the important points are here. The projected deficit for FY24 coming up is $109.3 million, and for FY25, the staggering number of 225.9. Right, and they have a mitigation plan which involves, and this was already made clear at the press conference, which was given on, I believe it was Thursday, April 27th, where they talked about, this was in President Cheng's press conference, but this is not a quote from him. It's I guess this was a handout that was given, that the actions would include if current funding levels were maintained. That is to say, the budget from the Appropriations Committee with some small increases, 8.5 million for FY24 and somewhere around 12 million for FY25. If that were maintained, more than 650 full-time faculty and staff layoffs, nearly 3,000 part-time positions eliminated, 5% tuition increases at community colleges and universities, and one of my favorites, elimination of high subsidy programs, most of which are those which meet the state's greatest workforce need. So that was obviously directed at the governor, who's quite enthusiastic about programs that meet workforce need. If we look at this, this is the graphic that appears both in the governor's budget proposal and in the response which the secretary of the OPM gave to President Cheng's press conference. And again, they make the OPM, and it's pretty clear this is coming both in the governor's budget and in the narrative in the governor's budget, is coming from the OPM because it's very same graphic and the same terminology, right? And the point is to highlight the decrease in enrollment from 89,000, now that's community colleges, Charter Oak, and the 4 state universities, to 64,000 in 23. So they go back to FY 2014 to 2015.
Take a look at the way the scale is arranged.
Yes.
Makes for very good class.
Right. I think this shows the clear prejudice of the OPM, the Office of Policy and Management, and their attitude is your enrollment has declined, you get less money. That's it. The only thing that counts is enrollment, and the only thing that as a consequence will be is that you're going to lose funding. Unfortunately, the response that the system office made is, if you don't give us the money, then we're going to take it out on the faculty, the staff, and the students. So both are in the same, let me call it problematic or narrative. Namely, it's all, quantitative. There is no consideration of the value added of public higher education, of the importance, the qualitative experience of the challenges, the achievements, the accomplishments of students, faculty, and staff. That's clearly the situation. What I'm going to add here is a little bit more. I mean, it seems to me, and I say this in that little document, which 2-page document, which Kalina shared with you. It seems to me that on the one hand, the somewhat inflated and not prioritized CSU 2030 opened the door inadvertently, I would say, as a unfortunate consequence for the Office of Budget and Management to make this claim that the legitimate demands of the system are unrealistic, untenable, and lack a strategic plan. We talked about the numbers being requested, and they are quite considerable. If you look here at the CSU 2030 request, 624 million, which is a significant increase. It's more than double the FY23 state allocation, which is 317, and then that goes up to 697. There are two problems with that, which I indicated in the comment that I made at the Finance Committee. One is that those numbers are not clearly justified. They may be justified, but they certainly are not in the pamphlet that we received, that 12-page or so, two-column multicolored pamphlet. And one of the points that came up, and I think that Ben Barnes made it, and I certainly agree and would restate it more vociferously, is that this needs to get I'll put it this way. I think the CSU 2030 plan needs version 2.0. This is version 1.0, and version 2.0 has to clearly indicate what items which were previously one-time items in the budget, for example, covering CBAC increases or some of the fringe benefits, need to go into the baseline, which still remains at $317 million, both in the governor's proposal and in the appropriations committee. And then what additional funding is needed in order to grow the system for the following reasons. Here are the programs that we want to develop and which are going to meet both the economic and the social needs of the state. That hasn't been done, and that needs to be done. But if we look at the further discussion at the Finance Committee, let me just add. I asked a number of questions. One was about CSU 2030. The second was about the reserves. And this is the question of, this is the question of the deficit. What proportion of the deficit is due to the community colleges, to the state college, or to the CSUs? That isn't indicated, but here are the actual numbers. This is a document, it's undated, and it was sent to me personally, so I'm not circulating it, but I'll just indicate that I think this is an accurate statement as of probably some few days ago of the projections. And the projected deficit of $108 million, 90 or some percent of it, 89% of it is from the the community colleges. The deficit at Charter Oak is estimated at 2.5 million. The only one which has a positive balance is Central Connecticut State University with a surplus of 16 million. Eastern has a small surplus at 418. That's $500,000. And then I was surprised to see Southern a deficit at 14 million, and Western, this was not unexpected, a deficit at 16 million. So that gives a total of 108 million, which has been brought forward as the basis for the 650 full-time faculty and staff layoffs. I don't understand how they can eliminate 3,000 part-time faculty at the community colleges without closing the community colleges. I mean, they would open it and then they would have to, I presume, close most of it because most of your courses are taught by part-time faculty, and that's an extraordinary number. The other question was the question of the reserves. And yes, so I asked the question because one of the arguments put forward in the narrative in the governor's budget and coming from the OPM is that the system has increased its reserves from 162 million in 2013 to 308 million in 2022. That's a 90% increase. And if you look at the numbers are here. For CT State, there are reserves as of expected. Currently, the reserves are, I'm sorry, I can't read this, $89 million. That's this line over here. At Charter Oak, reserves of 5.1 million. At Central, reserves of 82 million. At Eastern, reserves of 86 million. At Southern, reserves of 41 million. At Western, this of course is the problem child of the system, a current deficit of 7 million. And note that at the system office, which they maintain as a reserve independently of the various constituent units, a total of 75 million. Now, whether those reserves could be used to mitigate some of the 2024 expected deficit is an open question. Whether they are encumbered for specific purposes, most of them are not. Whether they could be shared so that those with significant reserves could share them with those with smaller reserves. Now, all that is an open question, but I think that that's important information that we need to have. I'll sort of sum
can
up.
I just insert one thing?
Yeah.
I think the main thing to notice is that the reserves that they're are still less than what they are claiming is the 2-year deficit. Like the
Are more.
entirety. Yeah.
Yeah, the reserves are higher. Well, actually, it's almost so the total of the 2 years is
335.
335, and we had 321. So
Yeah.
we're out by about 14, and nobody would want to use up all of the reserves that way. But the question is how these deficits are calculated isn't clear. Whether the problem is that they are taking the number that they wanted for the CSU 2030 proposal and distributing the shortfall to the various constituent institutions, I'm not clear on that. But if you look at their numbers, these were extremely high. Never mind increases from 317 million to 543 million, but also their expectation for PACT was $81 million in FY24 and $100 million in FY25. So that's basically the situation. The numbers do change from time to time, but I think that there is the conclusion that I arrive at is that the response to the CSU 2030 in part has been, which was perhaps an exaggeration of, or aiming high, if you want to put it more positively, we're caught between that and the underfunding that the Office of Policy and Management has proposed, and that's the current situation. I'm trying to think if there's any. I don't know if there's a specific questions.
Well, I have a request. Is it possible for you to send these data?
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean,
So I don't have a solution to this. Going back to a point that Kalina mentioned, we have to go beyond just pointing out the problems to suggest some solutions. But these numbers tend to change from day to day. And I think some of the numbers, I wouldn't go as far as to say some of the expected deficit for 2024 is exaggerated. For 2025, there is a serious problem. That's because the governor's budget and also the appropriations committee have barely an increase of 2%. That wouldn't even cover the expected rate of inflation. So the one thing that I did mention at the finance committee meeting, and that was a question I asked Ben Barnes, what is the likelihood of midterm corrections and also carry forward money? Right? And there are some perspectives of a certain amount of carry forward money that was not expended in 2023, and also possibilities of corrections in 2024 for 2025.
assuming there's a change in attitude towards what's asked of the system. Right. So I just want to emphasize that we got a lot of detail in terms of what the actual numbers of the projected deficit are, and what the mitigation plans based on that projected deficit are. But we don't yet have access to an understanding of how that deficit was calculated. And I think that that's going to be important going forward. But we can leave that for the future and talk about funding for now.
Yeah, I think at this point, all we can do is follow the developments. I mean, this has now gone from the governor's proposal to the appropriations committee. Now it's up to the majority leaders in the House and in the Senate and the legislature to make their decisions and I'm sure there's plenty of discussion going on of which we are unaware. I believe it's February the 7th that they have to make their final vote.
June 7th, yeah. Or
June
by
7th, sorry.
June 7th, yeah, is the end, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I expected quite a bit of discussion on this topic. Are we not there yet? We're still kind of spun around on this one.
Well, what can we do?
I'll give you my personal opinion for now.
Yes.
I guess we show up on May 17th with Recovery for All to at least highlight the large gap between where state revenue or our ability to use state revenue, let's say, and the actual needs for state services generally beyond even just our system, is, right? Talk about that gap. That said, that's a long-term sort of attempt to get us into a healthier place where there is even funding available that we can use in the state. You know, the sort of reapplication, renewal, I guess, of the bond block stuff at the beginning of this session kind of puts us in a situation where we're going to be in this situation for another 5 years at least. But clearly there are needs. I don't know how we calculated exactly what our needs are, but we know that there are needs. There have been needs. There have been needs for decades, if only for the fact that our state block grant has been pretty much as a dollar amount flat for like 15 years. And we know that the cost of living has gone up significantly in that 15 years. So the cost of operating our system has gone up, right? So, yeah. But we also have to make the governor understand, because that's really where the decision lies, that we need to have a little bit more capacity than we currently have. I think asking for savings from our system is unreasonable given that history.
Yeah, let me add, for 2024, I think the situation is serious but not catastrophic. And a few tens of millions of dollars more found between now and June the 7th would certainly be helpful in that respect. It's in 2025 that the situation is dramatic, and there would have to be some midterm corrections or significant carry forward in order to just meet the basic needs of the faculty, the staff, and the students at that point. But I also think that, and I'm going out on a limb here, that CSU 2030 has to be recalibrated, and it has to be made clear in the request for, it's not obviously going to be for this time, but for the next time around, because it's going to be another biennium eventually, what specifically has to be added to the baseline to take into account the CBAC increases and the healthcare fringe benefits, which are now being paid out of some other part of the budget. Right? And that goes to Kalina's point that the baseline has been constant for at least 5 and not more years at around 307 to 314 or so $million. And then we have to make clear what it is, strategically speaking, that we want additional funding in order to do. Not merely putting out a number, but saying what are the programs specifically, whether it's in business and entrepreneurship, whether it's in healthcare, or whether it's in the liberal arts, which seem to me like the priority areas where we should be expanding the offerings at the community colleges and at the universities.
Well,
that has to be made clear as well, because that's a strategic plan, and that's not there. So I think there's a question of CSCU 2030 2.0, where we can put a better foot forward. I mean, I understand that people aimed high in this particular 2030, and they're quite disappointed because not only did they not get the maximum that they wanted, but the system has been undercut by the OPM, and I think that's a serious problem.
Well,
but I think there are steps that can be taken.
we're saying we need to have a strategic plan, okay? And the problem is that at least last couple of years, the strategic plans were prepared pretty much without much participation from us.
Yes. Andre, your point is well taken. And I think we have to say, you know, we need more communication. I think that point was made pretty clearly today in the discussion, what's going on in the consolidation process. We need more communication. We need more consultation. And that means asking the Faculty Advisory Committee, and for that matter, asking the Finance and Infrastructure Committee of the board itself, which never saw CSU 2030 before it was presented.
The other thing is,
it's on that basis, and on that basis of communication and consultation that we can get beginnings of better cooperation and even coordination. But without it, we're not going to make any progress.
Okay, the other thing is that that strategic plan of ours should somehow connect with a strategic plan, if there is one, for the state, that perhaps the governor's office puts out or is working on. That's the best way, because that way we can say, hey, here's a piece that we can do and do better than anybody else, and this is what it's going to cost. Okay, in other words, strategic planning should be consulting not only us, and we should be the ones, because we're the ones that do the work. Okay, but also we should be consulting and looking at what the general state situation is and who's doing planning on that level.
I believe the new workforce commissioner has been newly added as an ex officio member of the board. It's possible that we could reach out and try to have a conversation there in terms of realistic sort of matching of workforce goals to our institutional capacity. I mean, that's worthwhile, I suppose. Thought? And Mary Beth, your hand's up.
I just have a question for David, just based on everything, your knowledge of all of this, because I don't have as much knowledge. But do you think they're really blindsided by this? Like, I mean, like you said, like the CSU 2030 was grand in their request, not necessarily clear as what, you know, they were asking for. But, and then right after that, the governor's budget is so clearly not what they were looking for. Were they blindsided? Like, it just seems to me like there would have been more communication going into this. Like, was this purposeful? They were asking for so much and that they knew they weren't going to get. I'm just confused as to sort of how this transpired from what they asked for to what happened.
Incompetence.
I don't know the answer to that question. It's an extremely good question. And I suppose some future historian, some years from now, with access to all of the emails and so forth, will be able to figure this out and write an article for some little journal where another several dozen people will read it. But for the moment, I don't know. My conjecture is there was an overestimation of what the system could get. And then there was having the carpet pulled out from under them in what I call the OPM contribution to the governor's budget, right? And so, you know, and then we're caught in between. We're caught in between. But I'll give you one more example. The CSU 2030, and again, I'm walking the plank here because it's not something people want to hear, called for $2.1 billion in building and infrastructure improvements from between now and 2030. Right? And when you looked at that, there was no priorities. Right? Was it $350 million for the Capital Community College? I can tell you straight away, I looked at the three items over 100 million. One was 129 million for a new sports facility at Eastern. I'm not sure that that was necessarily a big priority, but I can't tell. But I can tell you for the one at CCSU, $160 million for a STEM building, which we hadn't even asked for, or had been asked for 5 years ago, before we built a brand new engineering building. And actually, the president of the university, her priority, and I agree with this, is to have a new school of healthcare and rehabilitative services, and we need $40 to $60 million for that, for a building. So, you know, the impact of going forward with this, I can imagine at the system office, people were very pleased, and they thought that, they had a sympathetic ear, perhaps, of the governor himself. And then what I can say is, certainly from what looks to me, the OPM lowballed that whole thing, and now we're in this situation. It is, I think, dramatic for 2024, but could be fixed up. It's catastrophic for 2025, simply because neither the governor's budget nor the appropriations budget even meets the increase in inflation. But that can be fixed up too by midterm adjustments, which would nonetheless respect, and people should have known this. Let me walk the plank one more time. The governor clearly said he was in favor of a balanced budget with no gimmicks. He said he wanted to pay down the accrued pension debt. He said that he wanted to have a tax reduction for the general population. He said that he was not going to touch the rainy day fund because he expected even rainier days coming up sometime in the future. Who knows what's going to happen after November 2024 in this country. That also was a parameter that should have been taken into account. And I don't think that it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, David. I think like speculation about people's intentions or what they knew or didn't know are beside the point at this point. What in fact happened was a huge miscalculation at one point or another. A month ago, we were talking about historic investment, growth of programs, blah, blah, blah. And today we're talking about absolute catastrophe. And nothing, I mean, the governor did not stutter. He has not changed his tune. And that story has been going on for quite some time. So it's very surprising that we end up in this, that this situation should take us by surprise. And it's also a consequence, I think, of that large ask that we are at least characterized as being in as dramatic a deficit as we are, right? So I think for most of us who are tracking, what has been going on the past few days, past few years, we expected this, but we didn't expect it now because we have a whole entire college to open. So that's the shocking part.
But as people pointed out too, for how many years, since 2017 at least through 2022, the legislature,
right,
the governor, the public has been told the consolidation of the community colleges will save money.
Right.
We won't have to ask as much money of the state. That was the whole thing. Now,
right.
It was Marco Jakian. Yes, that was his line. But I mean, everybody is now stuck with it because the process was engaged to the point where even if you wanted to stop it, you probably couldn't, and it's going to go forward. I mean, as haphazard and as complicated as it may be, but that was a message sent to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Kalina, you and I know that there was, for a while, this little bit about, we're going to create this anti-racist community college,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was our discussions with David Levinson to make it explicit. We had 3 meetings with him and Michael Rook, and it was never clear how that was going to be done, right? Except for that one course that had been proposed, and Kalina, you explained the problems involved in that CSCS 101. All right? So these were unreasonable goals or just, wish lists. And then it has to all now get cashed out.
Mm-hmm.
And
as you say, the drop off is in fiscal year 25. When were the savings promised? Fiscal year 25. We are simply being held to our promises. And what I see in both the governor's response and in the OPM response is a pretty unapologetic attitude towards the consequences of the budget, which will include layoffs, right? How do you achieve savings in a system where the vast majority of the cost is personnel? Why do you create a giant central infrastructure?
Yeah.
So we're on track.
Yeah, it's not that we didn't make these points. It's not that we didn't make these points. I mean, Lois and Steve Adair sent, I don't know how many documents, wrote all these op-ed things. I mean, I recall the article which showed that it was the transition costs were at over $100 million. Yet the claim was being made that this would cost nothing,
right,
or $1 million at most. I mean, that wouldn't even cover changing the letterheads on the stationery.
So the fiscal cliff that would necessitate layoffs was built into the design of the consolidation. And while all of this was going on and no one was bothering to so much as pay attention to or the university presidents, we end up with a situation at Western where, you know, the official story is it was mismanagement at the presidential level, but we happen to know that there were years for which I'm using the word like the evaluation of the presidents were like a form letter that went out. You know, they weren't done. It was the same thing for every president for years. So the universities have been neglected, the community colleges have been destroyed, and here we are.
Yeah, well, anybody with a calculator and half a brain could have figured out that this wasn't going to save money. And the thing is that this equity thing is just basically to try to draw attention away from the fact that this is going to cost more, not less.
Right. Right. And right now we are dragging our poorest and Black and brown students into what is the equivalent of a condemned building. That's an old story.
Problem is, what do we do with it?
Well, what we can do is come back at our next meeting and see what has happened in the subsequent month, because we'll know by June the 7th what the actual dollars are. Right, so that part of the puzzle will be complete, and then I think we need to look and take our position as to what should be done next. And I think we need to clearly, you know, at the joint meeting we had with the BOR, we talked about going beyond the narrative of finger pointing and et cetera, right? And that we wanted full funding for public higher education. I think we need to go back to that, along with the recovery for all that Kalina has talked about, putting it in the context that we are not the only group in the state. There are many other social goods which are underfunded. And begin to look at a strategy that we can develop. And I think that there are steps that can be taken. I'm not entirely pessimistic. I think we're in a considerable mess, but I think that there are steps that can be taken if people of good faith make an effort. I mean, the folks who are the administrators now at the community college, they have to get this done and somehow accomplished without, you know, complete catastrophe over the summer.
What administrators?
I hope that they do.
Some of these people are pretty much incompetent too.
Yes, but we're going to have to deal with the people that we got, and they're going to have to do the work that they can, at least to make sure that the databases have been integrated, that the students' financial records are in good shape, and that the curriculum is being properly made available.
Getting rid of the only guy in the administration that can do that stuff. At Tunks.
Same at Gateway.
I mean, you know, I mean, we have a decent associate dean for faculty, you know, but our CEO is, I mean, Jesus.
Well, again, I mean, I think we've probably exhausted what we could say about this, except to keep, you know, track of the numbers. We have a meeting in June, and we'll come back and we'll directly address what is the situation.
Okay, then.
Well, let's hold on. We have a resolution next on the thing, and then we should also talk about our next meeting is with the Board of Regents.
Yes.
Where we can just a few days after the session ends, where we can sort of talk through these issues with them. And please take note that that one is going to be happening at 10 a.m. to accommodate their schedules on June 16th. So David, do you want to introduce the next agenda item?
Yes, I have a resolution which I want to propose. Let me just get it up here. And let me share if I can find it.
This is about Fran.
Yes. Whereas Fran Cohen is a longtime faculty member, recently retired from Tunks Community College with over 3 decades of service, and since 2004 as a full-time professor. Whereas Fran Cohen has served in multiple leadership roles at Tunks Community College, including Department Chair, Chair of Academic Affairs, Chair of the Student Affairs Committee, Chair of the Ability Assessment Team, Chair of the Governance Review Group, chair of the Tungus Task Force, co-chair of the NEASC-NESHE Organization and Governance Standards Subcommittees, and PSO president, in addition to membership in numerous other committees. Whereas 42 colleagues at Tungus Community College have recommended Fran Cohen for emeritus status in a multi-page letter arguing for his significant contributions to the college, its students, faculty, and staff. Whereas Fran Cohen has ably and energetically represented Tungus Community College to the statewide faculty advisory committee to the Board of Regents for Higher Education, where his work has been recognized as outstanding. Whereas Fran Cohen has legitimately exercised his academic freedom to criticize projects he judged failing to meet academic standards and cannot be discriminated against for this exercise of academic freedom, be it resolved that the Faculty Advisory Committee, representing faculty and staff in public higher education at both the college and university levels, joins in recommending Fran Cohen for emeritus status from the community college for which he worked and contributed so ably and significantly.
Okay, so I move to adopt this resolution.
Second.
Wonderful. Any further discussion? I'll just say that, you know, as demoralized as I am right now, I have been really proud to be a member of this faculty, mostly because there's so many amazing people I work with, and Fran is very much at the top of that list. So it would hurt me personally if he were not still part of us in terms of this emeritus status. And he is certainly emeritus in our committee for a reason. So thank you for presenting this.
And I think it should be sent, if approved, both to the CEO of his community college and to the president of the CT State Community College.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
Shall we take a vote? Let's do our usual. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
It's unanimous.
Okay, unanimously approved. Yay. Okay, moving on to a topic for our joint meeting with the Board of Regents on the 16th. Pam, yes?
Just as an option, right now the meeting is scheduled at 10 o'clock on the board webpage. However, we have availability at 1 o'clock if you'd like to keep it at your regularly scheduled 1 o'clock meeting. And all I'd have to do is submit a change to the state and repost that for 1 p.m. Your choice.
I think that would be good. What do you all think?
Yay?
Can I just ask Pam, are you sure that they would all be available at 1? I mean, that would be this is great. Thank you for that.
Well, I can never plan for the exceptions, and I always plan for a quorum. But I can't guarantee that all 14 voting members of the board would be present.
I didn't quite mean that. I asked it wrong.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What I mean is, no, it's my fault. What I meant was, do you think we'd have as many people at the 1 o'clock? What are the odds of having the better turnout, I guess is the better.
We'd have a better turnout, I believe, at 1.
Oh,
Really?
Let's go for 1.
Then 10.
I believe so.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted.
Well, here's what I'll do. I will take a poll real quick, 10 a.m. versus 1 p.m. and by Monday or Tuesday have a result for you.
Excellent.
Yes, and then I would propose that Colina and David choose the time that suggests the better numbers, right? Instead of having to decide that right now.
Done.
great.
Yeah. Thanks, Pam. That's great.
Okay. That is worthy of a Post-it note. Okay.
All righty.
Um,
Now for the topics. Or a topic, right? Is it as usual, Pam? We have an hour with them?
It really would depend if you wanted to extend. Really depends on the topic and how much normal FAC business you would like to accomplish post the meeting with the board. If you want to focus specifically and solely on the budget, as we'll have final numbers by June 7th, we can, I think, easily convince the board that Ben Barnes and the crew would do the presentation and have an open forum question and answer on the budget.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't asked them, but
Sure.
with everyone's concern, I'd rather have the message to the board and to the FAC once altogether.
Okay.
But
So,
that's just me.
yeah.
It's not
So
Pam's college yet.
Not yet. Legislative session and budget postmortem type thing. Is that?
I think they would go for that in a heartbeat. But if you have another topic, if there's something, I'm not sure what it would be that would be more urgent than that, or more engaged than that topic, I am certainly open to carry those items forward.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. Yeah, I would only add, I think that definitely should be the main meeting, but I think, I think having heard from David and Colina over the last year or so about sort of more conversations happening or more openness with the board, I think we should talk about a reset and how we can start. I mean, because of the whole institution is facing the problem. Even if we get the good budget, it's not going to be as good a budget as we need. It's not going to be what they asked for, I don't think. And so I think we should talk about how to work together better so that we don't keep running into these problems we're running into. I mean, you're always going to run into problems, but some of them are avoidable. So I don't know what others think, but I think that would be worth it. With Ira particularly seems more open to talking. So I would defer to Colina and David's experience with that to see if that's worth pursuing. But I think that's facing kind of an existential crisis, and I think we need them. We need them. They need us to make good decisions on both sides.
Sure. And Mike, I think the relationship between Rye and Ira and this group, as demonstrated by the change in the new program form and the prompt response that we got from the ASA committee to make that change happen, is a great example of that building of the relationship between Colina and as the ex officio to the ASA committee and this group as a whole. So I think, David, your relationship with finance has improved greatly in terms of getting information from Ben and from his group and bringing some of the issues back and forth. I think more regular, because you guys, even when you're off contract, meet regularly. I think having the staff support people like Rye and like Ben Barnes visit here more regularly as support to you as a group might be a really interesting approach to test.
Yeah, that's an interesting, the main topic could be the budget and where do we go from here? That's number one. And number two is the relationship between the Faculty Advisory Committee and the Board of Regents. And I'll bring up just two small issues. Back in 2020, we brought up a number of two problems in particular. One was the lack of joint meetings, which was in Section 185, but had been allowed to lapse over at least a time since 2017. And secondly, was a regular report from the Faculty Advisory Committee to the Board of Regents as an agenda item. And that's important.
That one has been bounced around a lot. I think if you would consider and discuss amongst yourselves more frequent relationships with the board chairs and the staff support people here at FAC might provide a more robust discussion as well as faster action on the issues that you might have to address, rather than a written report and delays. The action that you need might happen quicker outside of a formal presentation, but we can always discuss that. I'm not sure that the joint meeting.
Pam, can I just say that I understand that that's a suggestion in the interest of sort of a practical concerns, right? Getting things done.
Yes.
But at the same time, we are an advisory committee to the board. And what we want is a process by which we can actually bring advice to the board, not to the system office. And it's, the confusion between the system office and the board is a longstanding confusion, and half of our, workforce doesn't understand it for good reason and for precisely this reason. So that issue of an agenda item on the board's agenda is for that purpose, to directly advise the board. So I agree with you that maybe that's too much to take on in our joint meeting, but I do think it's something for us to sort of reflect on depending on the outcome of any decision on that agenda item. And we can revisit it as a group after the fact.
Perhaps what we can do, Pam, is have a discussion between you, myself, and Colina on this issue. It may not be the issue for the joint meeting, but I bring it up because it's been sort of hanging over there since 2020.
I know you guys have been concerned with that. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that any recommendations as advice from the FAC for actionable items have to come through a committee anyway before they get to the board. So your relationships with Ira Bloom and Rich Balducci and the actual support people the support staff that supports Ira and Rich Balducci, for example, actually do the work to craft those recommendations in something that would be presented to the board. So yes, I agree.
There is a problematic relationship there if the board does not have direct access to a committee designed to advise it. And that is precisely the problem that we're trying to address.
I think there are interim steps that we can take if that is still something that we can take. And I agree, this might be best for us to have an off meeting kind of discussion and build those relationships back perhaps over the summer.
Yeah, because my understanding is that the board is a separate entity from the system office, and that the system office answers to the board. So those are distinctions those are completely different entities with different functions.
But the board is staffed by statute. The board is allowed to have staff support them. And that is a structure that's been created.
Yeah, and what we had done in our 2020 proposal was we proposed both of those things, namely where there is an item discussed at the FAC which is relevant to academic affairs, that could be communicated to the chair of the ASA committee, similar for the finance committee. But you realize the problems that we have and the frustration. For example, at the last meeting of the finance committee, until one of the members of the committee showed up, there wasn't a quorum. Of course, I was right there, but I don't count even for the quorum, and I certainly can't make a resolution or an amendment.
That is by statute.
That's correct, and that's why.
And a much bigger issue than simply, and that's a function of the size of the board and the number of vacancies that we have.
All right, so let's get
yes,
into the agenda item, because we can have this. We've been having this.
Yes, we have.
And we'll figure it out eventually, but
we will.
We should focus for the meeting of the board, and this is my proposal, and I'm looking for feedback. I think it's a lot just to say, let's discuss what happened in the legislative session this year, where we go from here, and what are the consequences for whatever happens with the budget. And let's hope the thing that we're discussing is an unexpected win or a path forward, but whatever it is, I think that's more than enough. And then we can reflect together and see where we are there.
Yeah, so on the point of the relationship between the FAC and the board, I agree that we should have as a side discussion.
Yeah,
we can put a pin in it for now.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Are you at all interested in trying to make this June 16th in person? Or do you want to stay virtual?
In person would be wonderful, but a lot of folks are possibly traveling
Well,
at that time.
hybrid.
So, yeah.
We can do it
Always
in
do a
hybrid.
hybrid. Always do a hybrid. And if you want to put the feelers out and see if there is a good sense for that, I planned on, while the weather is good, try to get as many in-person meetings as I can.
Mhm.
Good. I agree with you, Pam, on that.
Let's take a little poll. Show of hands to those of you interested in showing up in person to either central or the system office in June for the joint meeting with the board. Cool. All right.
I will float mine and see if I can get people to travel and get back to you with that time change as well as in-person, hybrid, or virtual.
Great. Yeah, that human connection I think will be welcome at that time. So we'll do what we can. All right. Any other suggestions for topics, modifications, additions, protests, anything? Okay, so
Sorry, I have one last thing, Kalina, I just thought of. I know usually President Chang attends the joint meetings. I wonder if it would be beneficial to invite President Maduko to attend as well.
Okay.
My guess is that the invitation will go out, and I'm speaking for President Chang here, is that the invitation will go out to all the presidents.
Okay.
Okay, and Mary Beth, you'd like to, in particular, because of the sort of huge moment in our history, reach out to President Maduko and let him know that his presence would be welcome?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking.
All right.
Let me finalize attendees from President Chang. You might not have to reach out, Mary Beth, until after that formal invitation goes out, because President Chang has, in a lot of cases, insisted that the presidents be there.
Okay. Mike?
So Pam, thanks, Colina. Pam, when you say all the presidents, do you mean the
Six of the institution presidents, the 4 university presidents, Charter Oak and CT State, the 6 of them.
Thank you. And then also, I don't know if people think that Rye should be there too, but that might.
He might be. Let me check with President Chang again. If this is going to be a legislative update, it will probably be more finance driven. But I will check with President Chang.
Okay. And what's speaking of Rye, as we move into old or new business, so or I should say Dr. Kathuria, so I believe that our feedback, just our informal feedback that we provided for the APR process, some of it was incorporated. I have dropped the ball and not forwarded it to the committee, so I will do that, but with the understanding that the official process has yet to begin. So that form is not for sharing, it's more for us to see how much of it was incorporated. It will go now through the provost, through governance processes, et cetera, and we'll probably receive it formally at some point in the fall for feedback at that point. So I'll make sure that I share that with you soon. But again, just, it's not done by any means. So do that soon. Old or new business?
Okay, is it time for motion to adjourn?
It might be May 17th, though. Keep it in your head just in case you're so inclined. All right, go on.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Here we go. I'll stop the recording.